So here will be my last question. It's something I've thought about before when I studied Islam a little bit. I'm of course not claiming to be any kind of scholar or anything, but I did find it interesting. It seems to be the case that, or do you think it's fair to say that in Europe, Islam is to some extent what Marxism used to be? That is to say, it's like this kind of countercultural belief system. Like if you're rebelling against the status quo, that is one particular set of beliefs you might adopt or at least praise because it seems to be so against the fusty Christian like heritage of the West.
It's an interesting hypothesis, but I actually don't think it's true. I think
Really? Okay.
yeah, I don't think conversion to Islam is very common at all outside prison. I mean, clearly there are cases of, for example, white British people converting to Islam, but they're very unusual. Whereas in prison, it seems to be a much more common practice. I mean, in Douglas Murray's excellent book, The Strange Death of Europe, he has a section on people converting to Islam, how it's sort of the signs of perhaps a growing trend along the lines of what you just suggested. But I really think it's just people come from certain countries of origin with the religious beliefs that are common in those countries, and then they maintain them in Europe.
Yeah, that's it. But would you say...
and then they bring relatives and family members later via chain migration.
Yeah, exactly. But would you... Okay, so...
I don't think a lot of people are consciously adopting it as a counterculture.
As the...
I mean, maybe there's a tendency on the left, obviously, to be relatively lenient towards Islam in terms of its obviously very conservative attitudes to women and and homosexuals, etc. And that certainly is a kind of counterculture. But it's not. But people, those leftists, very rarely get to the point of actually becoming Muslims.
Okay, but their attitude toward Islam would be one that's much more favorable, and indeed, as you point out, almost like hypocritical in the sense that if I were a Christian and I said I have these beliefs, they would condemn that with great enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly overwhelming hypocrisy or inconsistency in terms of the left's attitude to Islam. There's a funny prank in a US town that was documented on YouTube a few years ago. I can't remember the exact context, but someone had written "Islam is right about women" and then put up posters all around the town, and it was a very liberal town, I think. And then people were interviewed about these posters, and they were asked, like, what do you think about this? And they would say it's awful. And then they were asked, what's awful about it? And they didn't know whether to say that it's awful that someone is trying to portray Islam negatively, or it's awful that Islam has a negative view of women.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking you could easily take passages from famous like Islamic conservative scholars and you could quote them, and then you could tell people, here's what an evangelical Christian said, what do you think about this? And then you could say, here's what a Islamic scholar said, and they'd be like, oh well, it's just their beliefs.
I've long wanted to do that study, and I'm surprised no one has done it to my knowledge.
I
that
mean,
would be an excellent, very easy study to do. You randomize the religion of the speaker.
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it's like there was that, I don't know if you saw this, there was that, I think it was a study where they took, man, what did they compare with, like literal quotes from Mein Kampf? Maybe like some popular anti-racist like quotes about white people with quotes from Mein Kampf.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting that, at least online, where traditionalism or trads are quite influential on the right, much more influential than they are in the larger society.
Popular culture, yeah.
Like their views are much closer in general to like Muslim views than they are to the views of the white people whose interest they claim to speak for on important issues like women and homosexuality. Not on every issue, of course.
Sure. I've actually seen people who come from the trad tradition, which I guess is redundant, but the traditionalism tradition,
Yes.
and they have argued that in fact conservative Christians should embrace conservative Islam as a healthier attitude than sort of the profligate liberalism that triumphs today.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I knew one individual who was a very conservative guy, and he became a Muslim in Britain.
Because he found
like
that,
he was a white British person.
Right.
He became Muslim.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, for that reason.